I think that's the trick. Is like, can it be useful? You're not asking it to save the world here or to do your job for you. It's is this a tool which I can rely on, which is going to help and take away some of the grunt work, maybe.
Welcome to the LabVIEW experiment. I am your host, Sam Taggart from SAS Workshops. In my 15 years of working with and training developers, I've had the opportunity to conduct a lot of experiments. Over here, we believe in embracing failure as the essential learning experience that it is. And what better way to learn than from other people's mistakes? In this podcast, I talk to industry experts, colleagues, and friends about their failures and how they have turned them into future successes. I am here today with Neil Pate. And Neil, you used to live in South Africa, right? For a while?
Yeah, I've moved around a lot, but I've lived there twice actually, in two
Oh,
different times in my life. Yeah, so I was born there and grew up there, and
ah,
then moved away, and then moved back, and then moved away again. So I kind of fly around a bit, strangely. So
so I'm curious from a LabVIEW point of view, what's the LabVIEW market like in South Africa? Is there a lot of there or?
yeah, it's no, it's dead. It's kind of completely dead, and that's one of the reasons I the second time moved away from South Africa again. Um, like NI abandoned it some time ago and never really picked it up again. And equipment is so expensive. Like NI stuff, it costs so much. Like the cost of a project is almost not viable if you want to use any kind of nice NI stuff. Um, it it's just doesn't really work. The business model just doesn't really work in South Africa. I guess it's similar in a lot of developing type countries where NI haven't really adjusted their pricing for their hardware. So it's just you just don't do it the NI way. You cobble things together, um, like a cheaper automation route type way, like lots of PLC type work, things like that, where you can get low cost PLCs to do a similar job. Kind of low tech-ish automation, um, or relatively high tech creative work, but with kind of low cost hardware. That's sort of the thing. So yeah, it's I moved back. So I grew up in SA. I studied there and moved to the UK, where I kind of found LabVIEW, and then had a fairly longish career there for like 15 years. Then I moved back to South Africa with the intent of kind of doing LabVIEW consultancy work in South Africa, and it just never really took off. Um, and I searched the market quite a lot. There just wasn't really enough to sustain it compared to like Europe or the States. So yeah, not
And you
not
were
really.
doing consulting work when you were there too, right?
So in England I was. So in England I was a freelance and I was doing consulting work. So I assumed I would then carry that when I moved back to South Africa. And I ended up joining and I did one consultancy gig that I got through NI, funnily enough. And I must have done a good job because the company actually offered me permanent employment.
Ah,
And given that there wasn't a lot of work going around, I was like, okay, well, let me just take on this permanent role. So I effectively became the director of an automation company
ah.
who were dabbling a bit with LabVIEW for like vision stuff and automation, and they needed somebody who could help out. So we had a small LabVIEW team, but not really enough work to be self-sustaining, and I think that's all got kind of shut down now. It's just not really enough to go around.
So I'm curious on your thoughts. You've worked in small teams and you've done consulting, and you also now work at a large company. What do you see as the big differences there? Because I feel like there is a huge difference going from one environment to the other.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've done it all. So my first role, I was actually a sole LabVIEW developer at a company, and that's when I was sort of desperate for work. I needed a job, and I would have done anything. So, and I had to learn LabVIEW. So it was a good combination of okay, you better get this right, otherwise you get fired.
Mhm.
So that was the beginning with single person developer, where I had no one to talk to, nobody knew any LabVIEW in the company. It was a bunch of DSP programmers and like embedded software engineers and this one LabVIEW guy who was me. Um, and then everything up to now, I'm part of a bigger team. So I work for Philips currently. And Philips obviously we have fingers in a lot of places, but still not giant teams of LabVIEW developers. So we have a whole bunch of LabVIEW developers all around the globe, but the biggest team is probably the team that I run, and even then, there's only six or so of us in our city here in Europe, with a few more in India. Um, so it's not a giant team. I can't say I've ever worked in a big team of LabVIEW developers, and even our team of six or seven here, we don't all work on the same projects at the same time. It's more like two or three developers maximum on a project at once. Just well, I guess you know how well LabVIEW scales with multiple people. So
Yeah, I was
it's
going to say, how has that worked having multiple people? Because I work with lots of places, and it doesn't, for at least the smaller teams, anything under like 10 people, it almost always seems like it's like one person per project.
yeah,
And
exactly. And
have
I don't think
problems.
that's terrible.
Well, they run into problems because then suddenly this project becomes hot, and they're like, oh, we'll throw more people at it. And yeah, you can have multiple people working on a LabVIEW project at the same time, but if it's never architected with that in mind, throwing more people at it just makes it worse, in my experience.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. You've got to get the basics right, like the sort of separation of concerns and yeah, like you said, architecture, or at least compartmentalizing different pieces of the project. It's like, okay, that subsystem is effectively yours, that actor slash module, whatever, is yours, and you effectively own that LabVIEW class or library or whatever project. And you typically don't want to be merging code uh, where two of you have worked on the same kind of library or class at the same time. So you kind of compartmentalize it that way. And you can succeed, I think, if you do that. If you're regularly talking to each other and have a plan.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is most of those places, because they usually only work one person to a thing, they don't have that mindset going into it. And like, I worked at a place where like the system was the class, fabulous.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Or the VI. Yeah.
We have different loops and they're all in different subfolders. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a step towards that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's good that you broke it out into sub VIs, but like all the groups of sub VIs that are all in the same folder and all have the same prefix for the VIs, like let's make those a library, like
Yeah.
let's
Yeah. Yeah.
break those
No,
out.
so I guess I've been lucky-ish in that when I was controlling the stuff myself as an individual, then I could compartmentalize on myself. And as a team later, I'm amongst a team of other very skilled LabVIEW developers. So everybody wants to automatically compartmentalize stuff and separate it because nobody wants the pain of dealing with a single VI that you're all editing at the same time. So I guess I haven't really been in the position where we've got an old code base or a more messy code base where multiple people are trying to work on it, because that's a recipe for fairly unpleasant developer experience, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest challenge is that people in those places, they don't. And I think this particular place I'm thinking of is an aerospace and defense company, so they're already kind of siloed and they don't like to talk about what they do or talk with other people. But they never step out of their bubble. And if you're like the lone library developer, if you got a team of two or three people, they just continue to do the same things that they've done in the
Mm,
past. And they continue to
yeah,
repeat the
exactly.
same
Yeah,
patterns. I'm looking at
yeah,
their code, I'm like, why do we do? Well, that's the way we learned, and that's the way we always do it. And I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
my
It's kind of
biggest
like they ramped up and hit the plateau and never really progressed past the two loops kind of Q state machine. That's good enough for now.
Yeah, my biggest frustration working with places like that, like I totally get when I come into places like that, like why they are where they are. Like that makes sense to me. Like, it's not an ideal place, but like I understand it. What kills me is the reluctance to change going forward. It's like, okay, we've got all this messy code. That's great.
Mm,
All the
mm,
new code we write does not have to be messy anymore. But trying to get that into there, and I think too, like I said earlier, I think part of it is that if you don't know what good code looks like, how do you write good code?
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. You're making me like it's been a while since I even thought about those kind of problems, which I did have a lot when I was a consultant in the UK, right? So as a freelance, you
Mhm.
get you have to go into a company to help out, and they've already got like, yeah, we already have the system working, and the code base is exactly like you described, right? It's you say, sometimes it's like, where's the LabVIEW project? Oh, we don't have a LabVIEW project. And then it's like, okay, I think I know what the rest of this code's going to look like.
Do they even
Um,
know what the code is? I've had them hand me like a USB stick with 5 zip files and be like, here,
yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
it okay. And
Yeah, but I guess I'm kind of lucky-ish now that the team wants to all work in a similar way. part of my role is to introduce best practices and frameworks. So I'm kind of rolling out my own version of actors, how we've implemented them, and all new projects get implemented the same way with these sort of techniques. And everyone who comes on board is trained up in these techniques, and it just makes things easier, right? Once you're all pulling in the same direction.
So I'm curious, you mentioned process improvement and frameworks and all that stuff. What are some of the things that you've implemented that you've seen the biggest return on? I think you mentioned standardization, but what else?
Yeah, well, for me, it's like so LabVIEW is crying out for, people want to have things running in parallel, and they figure out how to have parallel loops, and then they kind of introduce modules and things like that. And for me, the step is sort of the world of actors, which isn't, like once you've taken that leap and you've got a nicely designed framework, then you start to get benefits of scale. Because, for example, if you make a nice driver for DACMX and log input, for example, and you pack it up nicely in a nice little reusable way, then it becomes super simple to reuse in another project, right? And so that's what we've done. I've implemented at Philips this I think it's a pretty cool active framework of my own, and now we've had multiple projects where we've been able to build up the drivers, and we've now got like 40 or 50 different hardware drivers that we can, on the shelf, just pick off and throw into a project. They come in as a PPL, and you're up and running within minutes because everything is effectively standardized. Interfaces are standardized. There's a hardware extraction layer where the API is standardized, and you just get the wins that way. Lots of pain initially, right? Getting it all working properly and getting everyone on board with these ideas. But once you've shown someone how you can save time, and oh, you don't need to re-verify this piece of code because it's packed up like this. We've already tested it, and here's the verification evidence. People actually become big allies for those techniques.
So is the verification then a big part of your constraints there at Philips?
Yeah, so I'm actually part of the test and verification engineering team, and so our core, our and Philips is now a medical company, right? So medical products are extremely rigorous when it comes to formal verification of what you're making. So we have to start with written standards or written specifications, which we kind of turn all the way with the sort of the V model into something that we can use and then formally verify with verification protocols and procedures, and capture verification evidence, which we can then archive later, so that we've kind of showed that we've done the due diligence of saying, look here, this code works, or this subsystem, or this entire project. It is important to us, and obviously not all projects are run like that, because there's definitely a cost associated with all that stuff, like big time. I guess the same in aerospace, right? Like you'd 30% writing code, 70% documenting and proving that that everything you've done is correct. I mean, it's a necessary evil, I think, in some of the regulated or more important or industries where you can't really get it wrong, I guess.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah, I mean, back on standardization, like other wins that we've got is introducing things like, I don't want to call it CI because it's not really CI, but it's at least automated tests that you can run. There's no sort of formal CI process, but at least being able to build and push and have a result pop up in Teams a few minutes later saying your 700 unit tests ran correctly. That is a lot hard to set up, but very satisfying when it is done and all the cogs are meshing correctly and it actually still works.
I was gonna say, have you got to run reliably? Because that's kind of always been my problem.
It
It's like when it works,
it
it's
depends
great.
on the
When it
yeah.
doesn't, it's like a pain to troubleshoot.
So I've actually got a calendar entry that every Friday at 9 in the morning I troubleshoot my CI pipeline. It's set up, and even if it just means I just run it and just check that everything runs, because if I go more than about a week, I don't know, it's just something happens. It's the gremlins just get into the pipeline, and GitHub changes some way the actions are run, or something happens somewhere, or LabVIEW decides to do something,
A
and it all just
license,
breaks.
or something.
Yeah. So now that I've got it set up, I like generally don't touch it, or I know how to make it work. Okay. I just pray that LabVIEW updates don't break things in the future. But yeah, it's really fragile. It's not a fun experience to
Yeah.
to keep it.
Well, it does give you really warm fuzzies when it actually works, because then you're like, okay, all these like 50 billion things all lined up and like,
Yeah, exactly. So I've actually on some of our core framework repos on GitHub, I've got the little flag set up. So if you go to the repo, you can see whether the unit tests are passing or failing.
yep,
And I like to go in there just to like if I'm feeling down or whatever, glum, just go into the repo and I see the green or the tick box saying all the unit tests are passing. It just makes me a little bit happier, right? Uh, I don't know why, but just the stuff like that makes me happy.
yeah. No, it definitely has a lot of advantages. I have a question. You mentioned one of your big ones was reuse code and distributing it. How do you distribute that reuse code? And then do you just verify it once and then every time you want to reuse it, that code is good and you don't have to, as long as you don't touch it?
Yeah, so in theory, that was the core principle we are working towards. In that, if you do your work properly, you pack it up nicely and you put it on a shelf, virtual shelf, right, along with the verification evidence, which is like the um, everything from the requirements of that module all the way through the verification protocols and verification records. So that's the perfect world scenario, which almost never happens, right? So in fact, we don't actually do that properly, and the things get put on the shelf, they work, but we don't have that supporting documentation that we would like to. It's just often the team's not really big enough, or we're under way too much time pressure to get some of that stuff done. So we don't actually formally do that for a lot of the things. But effectively, when we're building things, we pack everything up into pack libraries. So it becomes a PPL, which if you want to use it in another project, you just grab the PPL from the repo and you manually copy it into your project and you're good to go from there. That's sort of the process we've found is the best balance of developer friction or less friction and rigorousness. It's not perfect, and we still have to screw around with PPLs a lot, but it's definitely better than some of the other approaches that we tried. Um, and I'm relatively happy with how things have panned out.
So how do you handle versioning with those then? Is that an issue or?
Do you mean like the actual LabVIEW version?
Oh, well, I meant like versions of PPLs. Like, how do I know I have the correct version of the PPL in my project? And how do I know, like, when I go to troubleshoot, how do I know what version?
Yeah, so one of my colleagues, I asked him to make a tool that is a little actor that we can drop in that effectively queries the PPLs.
Okay.
And because when we build it, we kind of bump the version number in the PPL. So for now, we at least, unlike our about screen, we at least list the versions of the PPLs.
Okay.
What I've done in previous projects is also then had like a text file on disk where
Mhm.
you put in your expected versions, and that way
Okay.
you can get like a little boolean almost. It doesn't stop you from running, but it just says, "Hang on, hey buddy, you've got a version mismatch. I expected 1.1. You've put 1.3."
Okay.
I have done that kind of stuff in the past, but currently we don't have that formally implemented.
Okay.
It'd be nice to have. My GitHub wish list is like 150 items of things I just want to add, but I just haven't been able to get around to doing it.
Hey listeners, welcome back to season 4 of the LabVIEW experiment. This year, to celebrate the 40th anniversary of LabVIEW, we're going to be doing a couple of special things, one of which we need your help with. We want to hear your stories about your experiences with LabVIEW for our listener episode. You can help out by filling out the form in the show notes. We're also looking for more sponsors so that we can keep this podcast going. If you have a few minutes to fill out our survey, that's also in the show notes, and we would appreciate it greatly. Back to the show.
Yeah, I guess that's a question of how do you sell those ideas, those little ideas to management and stuff? Because I've struggled with that working in big corporate environments because sometimes it's like it would be easier to just go do it myself than it would be to try to sell it to management sometimes.
Yeah, so the issue I'm facing in my team at Philips is so Philips obviously makes things like we actually make products, like X-ray machines and CT scanners and everything like that. but I'm in a central engineering team, effectively a bunch of consultants. So
Ah,
we have to actually just we consult to other businesses within Philips. So I actually have to fill in the timesheets, and I charge my time to other parts of Philips,
mhm.
which means, as you say, it's really hard. Then, if I want to do this feature, I've got to find a project that sort of would benefit from it, and then, although I don't have to convince anyone, because as long as I can effectively save time and save money, then I can go and do it. But I need a sort of inbound project that I can then use as a carrier to implement that feature, or at least kind of pay for some part of it, but knowing that in the future the benefit will come. And
Yeah.
it's all kind of a bit of a weird situation anyway with timesheets and internal money in companies. Like you feel like you're passing it from one person to the next, and it's just going around in a big circle. Sometimes it feels like that. So, um,
When I worked at Westinghouse, I had a similar role. I was like an internal consultant. But I actually was lucky in that my boss, I don't like, I did charge a lot of my time to projects, but I also had a lot of free time just to research stuff because we would have downtime in between projects, and it was like,
correct.
okay, here's overhead, like go. And the other thing I did too a lot there was trying to go out and do internal sales and marketing. Like, do you do some, because I spent a lot of time just like visiting different sites and walking around and seeing what they were doing. And like, oh, I can help you with that. I can help you with that.
Yeah, so actually, when I joined Philips in 2021, I was brought on effectively as platform architect of this vision I'm talking about now. Is we knew we wanted to build it, and they needed somebody to implement it, but they also needed somebody to go around and do exactly that, convince other people that they need it, right? Like and that's not so easy. Again, I'm sure you've experienced that when other teams already have their way, and you have to convince them why they should stop with their way, which probably suits them just fine, right? There's nothing inherently wrong with their way. You've just
And it
got
worked.
to, my dog food tastes better than your dog food. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's I think half the job sometimes is just marketing and convincing people uh, of the benefits of things. I think as you sort of move further on in your career, you end up doing more and more of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I feel like the consulting side is a lot of that. It's a lot of trying to convince people that things could be better when they're working, and it's really hard to do that. The easy ones are the ones where people come to you and they're like, "We don't know any LabVIEW. We had a LabVIEW guy who quit. Here's this project. Shit's a mess."
Yeah,
Because
take
it's
it on, take it on.
like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
like Dunning-Kruger curve a little bit. I think in a
yeah,
sense, people who know low LabVIEW, they have no problem hiring a consultant. As soon as they know a little bit, they never want to hire a consultant because we know everything and we know exactly
yeah.
what we're doing. You gotta
Yeah,
get
you
over
need to get over that first bump. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, but did you leave Westinghouse to go become a consultant, right? Or like how long have you been a freelance for? Like kind
Yeah.
of
So I
5 years or something?
started Westinghouse in like 2007 and I left in like 2013, I think. 17.
Okay, well that long. Okay, gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I left because my wife wanted to move to Colorado to be a ski instructor. And I
Okay.
met up with corporate America and I was like, okay, sure. Let's move to Colorado. And then I started doing freelance stuff. So I left Westinghouse and they immediately called me back and they had some other department that like, needed help. And so I did some contracting for them and then it just like dried up. Like
Hmm.
it was weird. Like I had work one week, the project was over and then nobody, like that was it. Nobody wanted anything to do with me. Nobody would return my calls. I was like, okay,
Yeah,
well, I can do this on my own. And then of
yeah,
course
yeah,
I
yeah.
knew what I was doing, but
Yeah. No,
yeah.
exactly. I think you got to, I guess, keep the pipeline sort of primed. As an independent, you got to keep an eye out for the next thing, or have lots of contacts that you can call upon. I guess in dry times.
Yeah, that is the hardest part. And I don't know if you like it's always cyclical. And the problem is when things are going really well, it's easy to get sucked into just doing the work and not doing any sales and marketing. And as soon as you do that,
Mm.
then everything is very perilous. Like I want to say like 2023, maybe, I forget what, like whatever, I think it was 2023, like literally best year of my life. Like I made more money than I've ever made by like August, right? And
Yeah,
the next day, like I
yeah,
lost two clients within like a week or two of each other. And like, it's
yeah,
like nothing. And it's like, what just
yeah,
happened? And it took a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
because
Definitely is cyclical. So, I mean, I had a few dry patches as well as a consultant, and I had to effectively go through recruitment agencies and
Mhm.
become like a meter on seats effectively.
Yeah. And
You're
that's
working at like a
really
third of your rate or something, and you're just like, okay, well, I just yeah,
hardest thing
got
about
to
that.
keep.
Yeah, the hardest thing about that is working for a third of your rate. And you give up a lot of control because now they like, you need to be here certain hours and all that. But to me, the worst part about it was they're not hiring you for your ideas at that point. They don't want to like if you have a better way of doing things, they don't want to hear it. They just want somebody to turn the crank. And I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
very frustrating because it's like, okay, I can keep doing this really crazy, inefficient thing, but the other thing though is if you are a consultant, I've found like the bar for those button the seat things is really low. Like they expect nothing. Like I put in like 30% effort and I'm a rock star, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it could be better. Like I think it's that like not knowing what's possible, and they
Yeah,
just
no, you're completely right, and that's also, but it's not really sustainable because you're not satisfied when you're doing work like that, right? I think like if you know what better exists, then
yeah
it's sort of the role that you just want to get out of as soon as you can, and they offer to extend your contract. You're like, no, thanks, it was fun, but we it's time to move on.
Yeah. Well, the scary part is when you find one of those jobs that actually pays well, because that's kind of where I am at the moment. I've got a gig like that and it pays well, and it's like golden handcuffs.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, be careful
Like
there. So
money. Yeah, that's kind of one of my big frustrations actually as a consultant, because like the biggest companies are the ones with the most money and the ones doing the most hiring, but they're also the most pain in the butt to deal with. And it's like I never really want to deal with them, but it's like I have to if I want money. So
exactly, and it's you need this stuff. Unfortunately, it's just
yeah, I like the smaller companies. They're usually a lot more pleasant to work with and yeah, more flexible. I get these giant companies like the very first company I did contracting with. I had no idea what I was doing. It took like 6 months to get the contract nailed down. They handed me like a 40-page contract, like, here, sign this. And I'm like, and
no.
it had like all these provisions. It was a giant mining company. It had repatriation provisions that I had to have repatriation insurance, and I wasn't even leaving the country. And I'm like, well, what is this? Like, oh, we put that in all our contracts. So I'm like,
Yeah, it's in all the contracts, and you go, okay, what do I do now? Now, no, I guess you just throw it into ChatGPT and say, is this fair? Um, as a small person, should I sign this contract? Okay, yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, I think I would still pay for a lawyer. That is one of my revelations was that paying for a lawyer is definitely worth it. Because like in the US, lawyers have a bad reputation, but I think part of it is because people never engage them until things are already wrong and they've already screwed up.
and they've already signed that contract in. Then, well, sorry, buddy, you're in it.
All the lawyer can do is damage control. But if you get
Yeah.
out ahead of it, they can be quite effective at avoiding problems.
Okay. No, I've never gone down that route. I've like never been unfortunate enough to need one, but also never been smart enough to pre get one, I guess. So
Yeah, that is the one piece of advice I give all consultants is actually to get a lawyer and get a contract and just lead with that because whoever puts the contract down first in negotiations kind of has the upper hand a little bit. So if you just come in with yours, they're like kind of taken aback and then they're negotiating to you as opposed to the other way around.
yeah. And a lot of time it's just kind of your contract is sort of word of mouth or just an email, right? Like, can you help? Yeah, I can help. Okay, when can you start? This is a rate. And you're okay, thanks, Neil Pate. And then you just start working at it. It somehow just works, I found. Um, I guess those are the good ones.
Those
Yeah.
work when they work, and then when
Yeah.
things out, nobody has any. See, in my mind, like that's like the best thing about a contract is it's just clear what has to happen, and it's clear like if something goes wrong, here are the steps that you take. Because otherwise, like you said, if it's just this gentleman's agreement thing, if everything works, great. But as soon as there's a problem, as soon as there's some natural disaster or something, or the power cuts out and you can't work for
Yeah.
days,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
what
Exactly.
happens now?
Or they stop paying you.
Yeah,
That
there
has
is.
certainly happened to a few times. Like, now how should we proceed here? Like, I don't think I'm going to do any more work for you. um, but depends what you've agreed, I guess.
Yeah. Especially, I feel like you got to be really like hourly is a little bit easier. If you do fixed price, you got to really have a contract because that, like, you deliver it and then they're like, we're not satisfied. And you're like, okay, well, great. I still want paid. And they're like, no,
Mm.
like,
Yes, actually, my first project as a consultant, I took over a fixed price project from another LabVIEW developer who'd moved on, and yeah, almost from day one, I was fighting feature creep where they said, "Oh, can you also do this thing?" I'm like, yeah, I don't really think I want to do that. See, and then it's the whole project was actually quite a bit of a struggle because you're keeping an eye on every day extra you work. Effectively, you're just diluting your effectively value, I guess.
Yeah,
So
that is challenging.
yeah, but so luckily now part of a big corporation. I haven't really thought about that those consultant stuff in a while, or am I going to get paid at the end of the month, or those kind of things. That I guess is one thing that's I don't miss too much about the
Yeah.
life of a consultant.
I'm curious, working at a big corporation, have you been on the hiring side at all? Or is that not really?
Yeah, so actually, I almost my whole career, I seem to I don't know what it is, but I get pulled into interviews. So maybe I have a friendly face or something, but I seem to get involved in interviews a lot, and definitely at Philips, I've probably done maybe a couple of hundred interviews actually, because especially hiring for people in India, there's lots of good LabVIEW developers out there, and like you get 100 applicants for the job quite easily, and on paper, all of their CVs all look very impressive. So it's very hard to do an initial filter just based on a CV. So you actually have to speak to a lot of the candidates. So yeah, I've been on the other side of the desk from quite a few places. Even in my previous companies, I was also involved in hiring.
So when you say there are a lot of good developers out there, what is there a ratio? Like, obviously, you get a lot of applicants. Uh, Yeah, are there a lot of people who you say their CVs is it that their CVs are not necessarily representative of their skills? Would that be
Yeah,
a
let me pick my words carefully here. There's a lot of people with certifications, which is what I kind of use as a first pass. If I've got two CVs and they're similar, and one guy's got a CLD, for example, I'll be
Mhm.
more inclined to want to speak to him in an interview because I feel like they've put that little bit of extra effort in to get that. For me, that just gets you the interview. And a lot of people have certifications, so you do need to talk to them. I'm talking about in India now, um, but I think there is a bit of CV padding going on sometimes, and you speak to people and you sort of unpick things and you ask them about projects, and it becomes very clear, like very quickly, that they didn't have maybe the exposure that the CV suggests that they did. Like you say, like, oh, tell me about this thing. This project number two over here. Describe this, and you just ask them to describe some reasonably complicated aspect of it, and within one or two sentences, they're fumbling, right? Because they didn't actually do the work, unfortunately. So in order to get to the good guys, and there's some really good developers, you just have to unfortunately speak to a whole lot of people first.
So let me posit this idea that I've been playing with. I think so. We were started at the beginning the difference between a small company and a larger company, and I feel like too sometimes developers who work in one or the other, like I think that you need to match that to your current situation in the sense that if you work at a big bureaucratic company and you hire somebody who's been a freelancer for a long time or being that solo developer, they're less likely to fit in than picking someone who has potentially been at a larger corporation before and kind of understands how to navigate bureaucracy.
Yeah, they're definitely less likely to fit in, but I would be now that now that I've worked at a big corporation and seen how things run, it's um
You
I'm
want
not sure it's necessarily a benefit if you say previously I worked at, you know, insert big company name, right? Because you would have ended up, no matter how much energy and how much free will you want to, the tide will have pushed you in a certain direction. And whereas somebody who's worked at a smaller company and who was able to influence things and maybe bring more of themselves, I actually think makes a better fit because they can likely fit into your way of working, but also are not afraid to talk about new ideas and fresh stuff and things which you might be able to learn from.
they also may be more well-rounded too, because sometimes people get into these giant companies and they work on one system for their entire career.
Mm, mm.
You spent 20 years doing one type of LabVIEW development. How versatile are you in reality? Like maybe you know that one area of LabVIEW really well, but if you work for a company that then uses some other area.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, as you know, there's probably test systems out there that are 25 years old
Mhm.
that are running LabVIEW, pre-LabVIEW 7 almost, and they still run. And some poor guy's probably got to maintain that system, and that's his job. So, yeah.
Yeah, to your CLD question, it's interesting. I don't know. The certifications, I have mixed feelings about them. Like, yes, it proves that you did it once on paper at least, but yeah, I don't know like I don't know how much I value that. And also like there are people who end up working at large companies who don't get the certification because there's no incentive for them to get it too. So
Yeah, sure, sure. I recognize the point, but it's something for me is a bit different. It's the person who's gone out of their way to get it.
okay, so
Like
so
just because there's no incentive to do it doesn't mean there's no value for you personally, right? Like if you've then said, well, there's no incentive, so I'm not going to bother, then that's likely the kind of person I don't necessarily want to work with.
yeah, you want
I
somebody
think
who's more self-motivated.
exactly, exactly. It's almost like the when you talk to a developer and on their CV they've never used source code control and they say, well, we didn't use it at our company. I'm like, okay, but how did you manage to work? Like, didn't surely you were curious how other people would did stuff? And so there's kind of like red flags for me. So not having a certification is for me, it's not a red flag. It's just I question I question your commitment because I'm not saying you have to be a LabVIEW champion, but at least having a CLAD shows that you're interested and you're passionate and you're thinking about LabVIEW and you want to get better. Um, and if as I said, like if I'm presented with 50 CVs, I've got to do a filter somehow. I've got to do a first pass, throw some in the bin,
Yeah.
and if I've got 10 guys with CLAs, they're the ones I'm going to want to talk to on a face-to-face interview.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I do think it is hard. Not every I don't know, it's weird, right? Because you and I we hang out with other people who are into learning and growing and learning new
Mm.
things. But not everybody has that mindset. And yeah, I don't want to work with people to be honest who like never pick up a book and never step out of their bubble. Like that does not
Sure,
sound very
sure.
interesting to
And I
me.
mean, there's definitely, like, don't get me wrong, there's definitely place on almost every team for somebody who's reached their comfort level and who just wants to continue at that level. There's place for that, right? Like, it is you need somebody who's happy to bang out the same stuff over and over. It's not everybody can be architecting everything all the time. That's going to be a mess as well. So you need levels, I guess.
Yeah,
So
there are places for everybody and they fit in. But yeah, I definitely like any place that I work, I want to have that like learning and growing culture because I feel like learning also applies to like the way that we write software in a sense, right? Because some shops are very they want to get it right the first time, and so they put a lot of energy and effort into that design up front and doing all of that. And there are other shops that are more like, hey, we don't really know what we're doing. Let's learn about the problem and try to figure it out more iteratively. I don't know if that resonates.
yeah, absolutely. No, for sure, for sure. And I mean, I'm kind of with you on the constant learning thing. I think the moment you do plateau, I guess for people that are curious, that's when things start getting really hard on a Monday morning to wake up and say, "Oh God, another week of the same stuff." Um, I like to be able to be constantly pushing it a little bit. You know, the Python work that I'm doing now was sort of started out of curiosity. Like, well, I thought I haven't, to me, Python was just this garbage little toy language compared to LabVIEW. And then I thought, well, let me actually try and that doesn't sound like a fair assessment. Let me try and use it. And now I've completely changed my opinion on what it can do, just because I kind of put the time in and actually started to play with it a bit.
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of Python, so I'm kind of curious how does that fit into your daily workflow? Like, where do you see it making a lot of sense?
So this framework that we've developed at Philips is LabVIEW based with the actors, but actually the whole sequencing and scheduling side of things, sort of the executive engine, I've moved into Python, and from Python I can call my LabVIEW APIs directly. Well, not directly, but it looks like it's directly. So
Mhm.
then in fact you move all of your business logic out of LabVIEW into Python. And that's so, for example, if you have a test sequence, then the implementation of the step becomes in Python. And it's so much easier to reason about that code with another engineer, say a mechanical engineer, who understands the system. But if you showed him a block diagram, you've really got to struggle to say, well, that thing's a loop, and that's a that, and that's a that, so that's a that. If you do a review with someone and it's just Python code, you can actually very quickly go over stuff and sort of sanity check everything. So we're using Python for all of our sequencing stuff, and I'm really happy with how it's turned out. It's performant, it's fun to write. You get all the benefits of a modern editor and a modern environment, which LabVIEW definitely isn't, right? Modern refactoring tools. I know this is one of your personal things, right? We wish we had these tools in LabVIEW. Well, those tools are there for traditional languages. I need to rename this class, or I need to rename this variable, and it's trivial in a modern editor. I guess it's not the language thing; it's the editor. So, yeah, I'm really happy with how we've ended up there. And I'm also dabbling a bit with Python for some robotic stuff. I'm playing with some robots on the side, and a lot of the ecosystem there is also Python based. So the knowledge that I learned sort of transfers across to there.
So I want to continue down the Python track in a second, but since people from NI might listen to this, I've had this conversation about the refactoring tools with Eli, and I really, at the time, I was pushing. I wanted something built into the editor, right, as opposed to like everybody reinventing their own tools. And Eli made the point that like there are other things that NI could work on, and that the community could better determine what refactoring tools they need and build those. How do you feel about that? Because I'm still kind of torn. Like I get NI, there are things that only NI can do and they should focus on those. But at the same time, I'm like, you talk about certain refactoring tools, they're just there in the editor. They're standard. Everybody knows them. Everybody uses them in languages like Python. So
No, absolutely. I think there's one of the key things for me is to know your tooling, right? Like when you're learning something new, is you should really get familiar with your tooling. And so, for example, I use VS Code now for any text-based stuff that I use, so Rust or Python or whatever, even some C++, and all the shortcuts are the same for pretty much the standard stuff refactoring. So it's quick, it's muscle memory, it's effective because it's baked into the editor. It's not like I need a different plugin for Python to do refactoring or Rust or different stuff. So in LabVIEW, I think it's absolutely something that belongs in the editor, where it's implemented natively, probably on the C++ layer or something like that, where it's quick and it's performant, it works properly. I would like to see the editor move forward a bit with the modern software developer experience, and I think the editor hasn't really. So I think I understand why Eli's saying that, because NI obviously has a limited pool of money, and they've got to put their developers somewhere on the place where they think it's most important. But they're hoping the community will pick it up. But then you end up with competing solutions, and everyone has their own thing. And for something as fundamental as refactoring or editing operations, I think that's NI's responsibility.
yeah, I guess part of what made me come around to Eli's point of view, just in a sense, is that I'm sure you're around with the whole NXG thing, and I remember sitting in a meeting where Fabiola was there, and she was tight. We want scripting, and the NI dev said, "Well, we have scripting. Here it is. It's in C#." Right, and they completely missed the mark of what the community was looking for. And I think that was the point that Eli was making, is if NI invents refactoring tools, we're going to invent the ones that we think you need, but they may not be the ones that you actually need. And
yeah, sure. I guess the analogy is like in Python, right? Or in Rust, you get those, and I think you've got your blue formatter or something like that, whatever. Like, so in Python, you get black and you get rough and you get all those things. Those are not baked into the editor. Those are externally community driven. Where because those are sort of personal preferences, I guess, maybe a lot of the time. Whereas the refactoring tools, that's a core feature of an editor. And if it's a core feature, it really should just be like you should just provide that in the editor, I think. I think like basic stuff should be should be straight in the editor. But then something like an auto formatter probably should be a plugin, like because you probably want people to be able to pick how they which auto formatter they use.
Mhm.
Um, I guess that's sort of where I'm thinking right now, something along those lines.
So I'm kind of curious. This brings me right back where I wanted to go, actually, which is you mentioned the LabVIEW IDE could be better. Let's expand that to the LabVIEW ecosystem as far as like tools, including the editor. What tools have you used in Python or other languages, Rust, that you wish existed in LabVIEW and why, and what use case do they fill?
Yeah, so I guess the first one that comes to mind is, and unfortunately, there's a few different, every language seems to have its own one, but it's just the package manager. Like, like each, so unfortunately, each thing has its own different package manager, but the good ones work so well. Like, I mean, for Python, you have pip, and that sort of works okay with the requirements file that you can auto install. Rust has cargo and its thing. Um, ROS, this robotics operating system, has its own thing, but they generally work, and they work quite well, and they're very fast. Whereas when I'm bringing up a new PC and I've got to install stuff, and I'm like, oh, VIPM is next, and that's no offense to the makers of VIPM, but that's just another hour of manually like installing packages and then dealing with the headache of, yeah, okay, but I've got two different projects, and this one's going to need that version, and this one's going to need that version. To hell with it. Let's just install the latest and hope for the best. So I think that's issues where NI really could improve the LabVIEW experience with the whole package management and getting up and running quickly. Like, think about if you get a new PC, right? That's a day of your life to get your code, just the code that you haven't get already, just to get that building again on your PC is probably about a day if you've got stuff to install.
Well, as a consultant, I every time I start a new project, it's at least a day to do a new virtual machine for that project
Yeah,
and to set up
yeah.
a, at the same time, I usually set up a CI runner. So doing those two things takes a day usually.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Whereas I'm playing with the other stuff now, and once you understand the nuances of their environment, you can make these sort of virtual environments in seconds, right? Like I can download Python or Rust and the dependencies and compile the project, and like in a few minutes, I literally am back where I started. With everything nicely sandboxed, so I know project A is not going to touch project B because all the dependencies are safely stored away in their own little place, and then I just think back to LabVIEW and it's like, okay, this is going to be complicated. I
Well,
really wish and I would fix that stuff. I know it's hard, and I know JKI is doing their best as well, but that's one area I would, for a modern developer experience, I would say could use some focus.
the thing that I noticed doing Python, and I've been using PyCharm, so VS Code might be slightly different, but I was using PyCharm and PyTest to write unit tests. And literally, I can have a project with several hundred tests, and I press the keyboard shortcut, and before I
Mm.
release it, the tests are done. And in LabVIEW, I have not found that to be the experience. No matter which unit testing framework tool I use, I run the test, and it still takes several seconds.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've used is it rough for Python,
Yeah,
where it's constantly lincing everything, and I read somewhere that it's almost so fast you don't actually think it's working because, like, literally in the terminal, you've got a list of the problems that are effectively the compile errors,
yeah.
and it's updated the moment you press the key on your
Mhm.
keyboard, and it's like seamless, and it just works so well. So it's just nuts, right? And then we and then we start LabVIEW, and then load the project and wait for the 2000 VIs to load, and then wait for the unit test framework to load, and then run that. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's you just everything. Now that I've done a lot of developments in these other languages recently, you move back into LabVIEW and everything feels so much slower and kludgy. And I mean, I'm probably the world's top 10 LabVIEW fan, but you just go back and you just think, oh, to write any large portion of code in LabVIEW now is just a slog,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
I've often said the closer I get to doing software engineering, the more I like text-based languages because just the tooling and the speed and
Yeah.
everything. And the closer
Yeah.
I get to the hardware, the more I like LabVIEW. So
Okay.
the more I'm writing drivers, the more I'm doing Skippy commands, the more I'm doing like LabVIEW FPGA, right? It is just like pretty awesome. But yeah, as soon as you want to do software engineering type stuff, I feel like LabVIEW, like it's possible. You can do CI/CD, you can do unit testing, you do all these things, but it seems so painful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess LabVIEW is perfect for I need to just quickly graph this data from my deck. You know, the old acquire, analyze, present thing
Yeah,
from 20 years ago.
yeah,
Whereas in Python or other language, that would be a lot harder, right? That's going to take you much more time. And sure, there's a familiarity aspect. We know we can do it quickly in LabVIEW because we know it so well. But I love to be able to make a messy VI with a front panel and just very quickly prototype stuff, like the ready
yeah.
stuff. But as you say, the moment you want to do things properly, think about how long it takes you to make a class in a text language. It's
Mhm.
seconds. Whereas in LabVIEW, that's like 25 clicks
Yeah.
and and then applying the thing and then the banner and then the banner doesn't work properly. And then then you forget to change the wire color and you think, oh, can I live with that wire color? No, I better change it to match the banner. And then I go in and then I change it to, it's just click upon click upon click. It's just busy work that you have to do over and over and over,
Well,
like making the accessors, get and set and saving them and making the icons and then changing the style because I don't like having the class out on a get. So I
yeah,
delete the class and I just fucking just do it
and removing
over
all
and
the
over.
hierarchy structures and
Yeah, it's crazy. It's
so let's talk about something that I think LabVIEW may do better than Python, and I think you hit on it. Have you done any UI stuff in Python?
so I've played with Qt or Qt, I don't know how you pronounce it right. And I've done a little bit, but nothing serious. So nothing that compares to what I've done in LabVIEW. And um, I'm sure it's probably quite a challenge unless you use one of these external design tools to implement it.
Yeah, I've played around with Tkinter or something, and that worked all right for like simple things. But I just the whole time I was doing it, I was like, this would be so much easier in LabVIEW.
Yeah, exactly. And it's pretty ugly if you use some of those other toolkits, right? The TK stuff, it looks like it's from the 90s as well. It even puts it's even LabVIEW puts it to shame sometimes.
I was going to say that, yeah, people who know stuff complain about LabVIEW a lot. One thing I've been thinking about doing lately, and I haven't really done this, but I've heard other people do it, is a lot more web-based stuff. So apparently there's like some X control or something you can download that's like embeds a browser window inside your VI, and you can just write everything in with JSON and or JavaScript and HTML and CSS and all that.
Yeah, but now you need to become a front-end developer, right? And I think now you've opened up a can of worms on the whole. You need CSS and you need to be good with
Yeah.
JavaScript, and then the which JavaScript framework am I going to use? And yeah, I think it's definitely the way the world is moving. It's everyone the browser is the GUI these days, right? So I almost think that battle is over, and it's just going to be a question of time before we accept that in the LabVIEW community. But I don't particularly want to learn HTML at the moment.
I found working pretty well, and it kind of got me into this a little bit, was doing CREO stuff and developing on CREOs. And it's really nice if you can have some sort of web app on your CREO that somebody can walk up with a laptop. They don't have to install anything. It doesn't have to be a special laptop. It just has to be on the same network and you can connect. And I found that quite useful. And then even for like, I don't know if you do a lot of CREO stuff, but what I found for communicating stuff from the CREO, I found web services to be quite nice for certain things. Um,
Yes, I've never used a web service on a Serial, I guess, but all the Serial stuff I normally make a Windows host, which then hosts the GUI, and a few times actually I've had the embedded GUI, so with literally like a video cable plugged into the Serial itself. But that has its own struggles as well because getting fonts right and getting the GUI to look nice and everything, it's maybe not something I would actually recommend. I think keeping the Serial headless is probably the way to go.
Yeah, well, the way I did it recently, like, we had an HMI a GUI written in Linux, actually, not Windows, but I still used the HTTP post request back and forth. And it was really nice because I didn't even have to run the GUI. I could just from the command line do a curl command and see that it was up, and I could see information.
Mhm.
I thought that was really nice. That gave me that like debuggability without having like, normally if you're sending TCP IP messages across the river, okay, yeah, you can open Wireshark, but like that's
Yeah,
less.
it's a pain, isn't it? And you have to have both sessions running nicely, and it's not just
Mhm.
simple to reconnect and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
It's,
mean, I went down the route of the NXG based web module a few years ago. So maybe around 2021, I
Mhm.
had a project which looked like it would benefit from the web module or whatever it's called. I'm probably get the name wrong. And I did actually implement something with it. And I forget how it communicates. I think it uses web services actually to talk to the host. And in the end, I got something that looked okay, but it was a real struggle, and the experience was just so unpleasant
uh,
that I never want to touch the web module again, and I don't know how big a future it has in the NI tool chain.
I was
So
gonna say, yeah, Matthias is always complaining about how they're not updating it enough, and yeah, the people I know who know web stuff have all been like, yeah, like it kind of works for simple use cases, but as soon as you try to do anything more complicated.
that's pretty much what I hit on. Yeah, I was just on the cusp of it being my GUI was simple enough that I could make it work, but yeah, it wasn't fun. So
So I want to make sure we have time to talk about AI and the future of LabVIEW and the future of software development, because you mentioned that when you on the form that you filled out to be a guest, and I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. I know I have my opinions and they're very strong, but I'm willing to be convinced or changed or.
yeah, I guess it depends on the day that you catch me on whether on my opinion on it. Um, so in terms of like AI and AI assistants, right? Coding tools or copilots, I'm really on the fence on this. Like they can make you feel so productive, and in fact, you are productive in that you're able to make stuff very quickly. And in fact, with the right prompting and the right kind of persistence, I think you can actually make some very high quality stuff. Um, I'll give you an example of something I effectively, I don't want to use vibe coding because for me, vibe coding is you don't even look at the code. So
Yeah.
I didn't, it's more, I heavily leveraged a Copilot and I was doing some embedded Rust development and I had a little embedded target and I used Copilot so getting the tool chain up and running and getting all the nuances of embedded development is quite tricky sometimes, right? Like if you want to just make an LED blink on a wolf, on it's sounds easy, but there's a 2,000 page data sheet you have to read to know which registers you have
Set,
to
and then you have to know how to wire it all up too. Make sure you got the right pull-up resistor and all kinds of.
Yeah, exactly. So I tried to do it myself manually, and it just wasn't working, and I just couldn't get it to run. And actually, in Rust, there's these crates that do all the hard work for you. And when I ran the example code, it just works. Like so, I knew it was working, and then I tried to roll my own, and it just didn't work at all, and I just couldn't get it. And I tried over one Christmas, and it just couldn't get it working. And then I came back later, like 6 months later, and I passed my code through an AI assistant. And I said, "What's wrong with this?" And it pointed to one line, and I was kind of blown away. And it showed me that I had the wrong bit mask for one register, and I fixed it. And it's like, and it just started to work straight away. And that little bit of like the um, sort of the endorphin boost and everything, it really it makes you feel because you're making something, and
Mhm.
it makes you feel good about yourself. And then a couple of years later, I I, I used the AI to a very comprehensive series of Rust tutorials where I went all the way down to like low level assembler using the AI. And it's stuff that I look at the code now, and there's no way I could ever have come up with it myself. Like showing how the thing boots, and like doing all the random stuff. So I really did make something, and part of it was my brain, but the vast majority was this AI assistant. And here's the problem. If you ask me to recreate that code right now, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't tell you almost anything about it because I didn't type it. I didn't think about it. I didn't do any of the the hard work that I think makes it stick in your brain. And that's the bit that currently is making me feel not so great about the AI stuff, is that although I'm productive, I don't think I'm getting any smarter. Like if you took the tool away, it just grinds to a halt. And that makes me uncomfortable, is knowing that I'm only able to work with the tool. And that's actually making me pause now. So although I still use co-pilots regularly, I'm now using them much more as like a person helping me. But for example, I want to type the code myself. I want to actually do it. So if I need help, I say, how do I do this thing? And I get it to describe it generally, but then I try and actually do the implementation. Because the moment you just kind of start auto tabbing and just auto completing, and just you've written 100 lines in like 10 minutes, and
You know,
it runs, but what like who knows what I've just implemented.
yeah, and
And
I found also it writes a lot more code than it needs to. Sometimes it's very verbose, and yeah,
yeah, and I think that's the worry, is that is I at least can recognize that, whereas I'm not so sure that somebody who's brand new to computers or brand new to coding, who gets sucked into this as the very first experience they have, that I worry that they're gonna end up being a very different kind of software developer. I don't think they're going to learn as well as someone who's done it the hard way.
that is an interesting angle. I want to pick a different angle, and that is you said something like it makes you feel more productive. And part of my question is that a case of selective memory? So, like, I used to be really into mountaineering, right? And I would go on this mountaineering trip, and the whole trip kind of sucked. Like hiking up the mountain, carrying heavy packs, it's hot, whatever. It's cold, it's windy, the whole trip sucks, but you get that one moment of standing on the summit, like, oh, this is awesome, right? And when you come back, that's the one thing you remember, and you
Yeah,
forget
yeah,
all the crap that led up to it. And I wonder if that like little hit of dopamine is enough that you remember that time and you forget oh well, because I've had situations like you have where I put in a prompt and it finds the problem right away. And I've also had situations where I put in the prompt and it tells me something and I go down that rabbit hole. No, that's not it. I go down another rabbit hole. No, that's not
mm.
it. And sometimes they're good rabbit holes to go down, and sometimes it's a complete 180 tangent. And so I wonder, because there was a study that came out recently where like people who used AI reported they were more productive, but when they actually did the numbers, they were actually less productive or the same. And I thought that was an interesting study. I mean, it's one study, so like, the study itself could be flawed or whatever, but
Yeah, it could be. I think so. For me, it's you're definitely more productive in the short term, like in the time order of days or weeks. I think, like if you just need to get something done quickly, you can bang it out with AI, and it will probably work. You'll probably make it work, and it will be fine. It's if you want something cohesive that fits into the rest of your code base and follows your best practices and is actually robust, then then I think you're probably going to be on a similar level of productivity, because you just have to go much slower with the AI. You have to um, the prompts need to be a lot more careful, and you need to have a lot more refinement and iterations. You definitely can't just accept the first thing that it gives to you. So I think there's sort of a balance to be had. But I mean, there's definitely places where I'm massively more productive, and I'll give you a concrete example, and that's writing unit tests. Um, you can you can really quite quickly knock out some of the more boring tests uh, just with the AI. With a copilot, you can say, please, here's a new method. I've implemented this method. Can you do some of the basic unit tests for me? And it does a pretty good job actually of implementing some of that stuff. And as long as you watch what it's doing, because sometimes it just mocks everything and it passes the test and hasn't actually done anything. And you look at it and you think, but you've literally just mocked the whole thing away here. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, you're right.
yeah, the sycophantic part is kind of weird too. because it can
Yeah,
be
it's like, what? Why did you do that? Like, you're not helping me.
yeah, yeah.
But I don't know. So Sam, I'm kind of on the cusp, and what I'm trying to do is just be cautious with how I do stuff and how I use it.
Yeah.
But I know now, like I just reach for an AI assistant for almost any searching I do these days. Like I don't Google anymore. I Gemini. Like it's crazy, but it's changed the way I go about searching for information. So if I'm learning a new framework, whereas before you would have Googled and you would have tried to find the right phrase to Google, and you would have heard somebody made a web page, and you would have then gone to the web page and you would have found the first 10 web pages were garbage because that's not the thing you cared about. Now you can very quickly get uh, um, a chat tool to distill that information and to condense it into something that you can then think about. And you could read it and say, "Yeah, I believe that," or "No, that seems suspicious." Um, that I think there is still a lot of value to be had.
I haven't used it to replace Google yet, but I have used it to replace Stack Overflow in the sense that like I get similar quality results, but it condenses it down. But I don't know, it depends on the question, right? So like to your point earlier, like if I actually want to learn something, I skip the AI completely, go to Stack Overflow. If I just want the thing to work, then I tend to do the stack or do the chat GPT route and it works all right.
Yeah, the issue is that tooling is becoming so complicated, like modern stuff, and you run something and it just doesn't work.
Mhm.
So, like as I mentioned, I'm playing with this robotic stuff, and so I'm kind of relearning Linux. I haven't done any Linux in a long time, and the frameworks that are in use are this they're quite complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot that can go wrong, and I guess in the old days you would have just sat there and banged your head for hours and hours and hours until you figured something out. And that's like your mountain climbing thing. Like that wasn't fun. Like the end, getting it to work yourself, that was briefly like, okay, I'm a genius, but I've wasted 2 weeks of my life. Uh, I'm not sure I want to be doing that stuff anymore. So, for example, if I can use the AI to diagnose some arcane Linux command for making sure my system D daemon starts at runtime, like I don't need I'm not a I don't need to know these details. Just help me with this task. Like
Mhm.
it's I guess it's picking how you're going to use it.
So, picking how you're going to use it again, I have a question for you, and this goes back to the productivity thing. But I don't know if you're very familiar with the theory of constraints, but it basically kind of says like you've got this pipeline, right, where customer comes to you with a request, and at the end, code spits out that solves their problem, right? And that code goes through several steps. And the theory of constraints basically says that like there's if you it comes from manufacturing. So you've got all these things coming down a conveyor belt, and like the conveyor belt can only go at the speed of the slowest thing, right? So like it
Mhm.
doesn't make sense to speed up anything on either side of it because if you speed up downstream, they're just gonna be standing there waiting. If you speed up upstream, then you're just making more and more of a backlog, and it's not really benefiting anybody. And I wonder, because you live in a highly regulated environment at the moment, how does that apply to the AI stuff? Because I see like, okay, it may speed up the actual writing of the code, but is that the actual bottleneck in your process from the time that like somebody requests something to the time that you actually are able to deliver it?
Yeah, so definitely not, right? Like the actual writing of the code is a small percentage of the thing. Like it's probably less than 10% of an actual project when you take in verification into account. Because if we make a test system, uh, it's it's months of verification work to prove that this thing is doing its job correctly. So an AI is only going to speed up a little bit. And actually, within Philips, we're like every other big company, very aggressively exploring how AI can be used.
Mhm.
And writing code is just one of those aspects. So we're encouraged to experiment with how AI can uh, act as a productivity multiplier. So, for example, cross-checking a document against a list of standards, where you feed it into an LLM and you ask it, say, please check that these references are correct or something like that, or things like that. So that's not necessarily code generation, but that's still very much the use of AI to help you. And there is
Question.
benefit there.
When you're doing that though, do you worry about hallucinations? Because I would think in a regulated industry, right? Like there's been lots of cases of lawyers, right, writing briefs that cite cases that never existed and getting smacked for that. Do you worry about that? Or
We
just
we do, but at the same time you don't, because it's not like the first thing you do makes it into production, right? There's so many levels, and in fact, I mean, this is probably going to scare you, right? But the medical industry itself is moving towards these commodity AIs that people can plug into their systems, which are effectively black boxes. Like there's now a marketplace for AI tools that vendors can bring into their system. Like, for example, uh, there might be an AI to detect irregular heartbeats that
Mhm,
some company, not Philips, has made and has somehow verified to be correct.
mhm,
And you just ingest it into your tool, and you then trust the output. But then there's all these caveats of what if it's wrong? Like, how have you even proven that this algorithm is correct? And it's really opening up a very big, like not quite can of worms, but people are actively thinking about this on how we go about proving that these things are correct.
mhm.
Um, and like all the big players are doing this right now. Everyone's very actively in this space because there's just so much to be gained, I think. It, we shouldn't be afraid of the fact that it might be wrong to not proceed. Like if you have an AI that's good at detecting cancer cells, we can train it pretty well. And um, if you can at least help relieve the burden of some of the doctors, because like radiologists are so scarce, their time is so valuable that if you
Mhm.
can increase the chance of detecting cancers in people and then still pass those cases on to a human to verify, then you've just gained. You haven't actually lost anything. Like
Mhm.
if you took the AI away, then the doctors wouldn't have enough time to look at all of the pictures.
Mhm.
So you would miss things anyway, right? So it's sort of a lesser of evils kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, this put it this way, the genie's out the bottle, right? There's for all of this stuff, um, there's just no way to contain it. Let's just see where things end up and hope we can direct it and steer it into a way that's generally beneficial for mankind as a whole, rather
Yeah.
than rather than some terrible dead end where in 10 years' time all the software developers only know how to prompt, haven't got a clue how to debug anything, don't actually know how to architect anything creative themselves because they've never needed to. Like let's hope we don't end up in that scenario.
Yeah.
Which is my worry, right? It's like I don't see any evidence of creativity in AIs. So although the world probably doesn't need a new JavaScript framework, um, it's it's still good for people to think about these things and to come up with it. And I worry that we're harming future um, creativity by relying on it too much now.
So, to bring this back around to LabVIEW, what AI tools have you used with LabVIEW? Have you had any success? What works? What doesn't?
Geez, okay, now you're opening some wounds here. I spent a few weeks trying to get Nigel working, and I never actually got past the login screen, unfortunately, for whatever reason. And I even had Eric referred on a kind of support email at one point. It just never got resolved, and either it was my corporate laptop or something, or some connections. I was never able to actively get it to work. So I did use Nigel in the early beta about 2 years ago when it was still kind of not publicly released. And I had some pretty bad experiences with hallucinations where it was trying to convince me that a certain property node existed, and it was so confident about it that yeah, I was really disappointed to find out that actually it was a complete hallucination. So for um, so for me now, I haven't had any positive experiences with LabVIEW and AI tooling, but I think it's just a question of time. And there's certainly areas where I'd really like to leverage it, like for example, auto documenting a VI. think that's just for the VI documentation. I'm not very good at creating that documentation myself, and I would prefer to offload that to an AI. I think that's a relatively harmless task. I look forward to the day when LabVIEW can do that. That's something that I think would help. Like in Python, right? Writing doc strings. Like that's just busy work.
Yeah.
No one wants to write a nice doc string. Like show me the developer who really likes writing the method doc string. Um, and yeah, I don't think so.
There's a
So
handful of them, but that's it. Yeah.
yeah, so that's the kind of stuff where I'm would be excited to see it coming, but I don't see too much use of things like explain this code to me. Like for example, just because there's not too much LabVIEW code, I think that I couldn't read. Whereas in other languages, like for example, if there was some assembler and I wanted to understand how it works, I've got not nearly enough experience in it, and I'd really like to leverage an AI. So yeah, I'm interested to see how things come along in a few years, though.
I realize. So at the current moment, I'm slightly the opposite in that I would like it to be able to explain things only because, like, yes, I can get all that from clicking through, but like inheriting lots of projects, right? And my friend always reminds me, people who do things well don't come and call me, right? So when people call me, it's usually because it's a mess.
Mhm.
And so they hand me this mess, and just getting my head around it, being able to say, here's this giant project, give me a one-page summary of what you think this thing does. Even if
Mhm.
it's wrong, at least gives me a starting point and some things to look.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
But the problem is, at least at the moment with the Nigel, it has like a 20 VI per day limit, which to me,
Oh,
like,
really?
really
Okay, yeah,
kills
what's the
it.
point? Yeah, yeah. That's a toy project then, I guess. Yeah, that's the bit you don't need help with.
Maybe that will change, but yeah. So like 20 VIs per day, if I inherit a thing that's 20 VIs per day, it's probably like the VI.
Yeah.
Although in that case, if it works. But yeah, that
Yeah,
just
yeah.
weird to me that they would limit the number of VIs because I think it would be more like size or complexity. Because the
Because can you currently ask it to look at a LV proj and tell you what's in it? Or does it only work on a VI basis at the moment?
You can tell it. So with I was able to tell it like I had a project open and I one of my open source projects and I asked it about it and it pulled all the VI description. So it came up with a thing that sounded really good, but I recognized a bunch of the phrases because all it really did was pull the VI descriptions.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, like that's still
It's
useful.
a start, right? Yeah.
Like I can go look at that myself. So like I don't. It was not at the point where, but I don't know if I knew nothing about the project, maybe that would be useful.
I think that's the trick. Is like, can it be useful? You're not asking it to save the world here or to do your job for you. It's is this a tool which I can rely on, which is going to help and take away some of the grunt work maybe. And um, that is, I think, beneficial to people because we're being asked to do more with less time. So anything you can leverage there is useful, I think.
Yeah, well, I often tell people like code and tools don't necessarily have to be perfect to be useful. So, I mean, I think that's like that's a lot of like the agile methodology of like, you don't have to wait to ship the code until everything works. You can ship them part of it and it might still
Mhm.
be useful. And
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yeah, no, you're right. You're
I
right. As
mean,
long as you're getting some benefits.
yeah, to me, I think my biggest hang up, and this is just me with the AI thing, is just the trust issue. And as somebody who's hired engineers, you might get this, but like if I hired an engineer and I asked them a technical question and they just confidently made something up with no basis, and we're just like, oh yeah, here's the answer,
Yeah, yeah,
I would fire them.
yeah. I'd far rather they started off with, I don't know, maybe it's this,
Yeah, exactly.
rather than it's
This or
definitely
this.
that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then when you correct them, they immediately say, oh no, you're right. You're right. No, it's this thing. Like
yeah.
that to me, just like that kills it. And so like I don't know. I have trouble getting over that in my mind. But
Yeah, exactly. I literally yesterday was trying to get this thing working on Windows with this robotics operating system, and I went down an absolute rabbit hole. And I got to the end, and I thought, what's the point of typing this? But I'm going to do it anyway. I said, why did you tell me to do that? Like I was so angry with the AI. Like I was like that was just wrong. because at the end it says, yeah, of course, I should never have told you that. It's like, well, couldn't we just have skipped, like, skipped to that bit? So, yeah.
All right. So, wrapping things up, there's one question I always ask people, and it is, can you tell me about an experiment that you tried and what you learned from it? I mean, I feel like we've talked a lot about experimenting with different things, but
Experiments that I tried. I mean, I've tinkered with so many tech things, right? And a lot of them go nowhere. I guess the experiments that I like is, am I able to learn this new thing or to pick up this new technology, or do I like it? So a concrete example, in 2018, I was really unhappy with the state of LabVIEW, right? Like I was really fed up. I was just the writings on the wall. No one's listening to me. They even want to remove public and private. They want to remove virtual folders, and I was really just in a bad place. I think I've got like 30 years of my career left. I do not want to use what NXG is going to become. And so on a on a pure whim, I thought, okay, well, let's pivot, right? Let's try something completely different. And I actually stopped doing LabVIEW and I started to do some Unity development, so Unity and C Sharp, effectively as an experiment. Like, is this something that's going to be fun? And I went to work for a company that made um, vehicle simulators for heavy mining equipment. So really big, effectively like simulators you climb in and you drive with
Mhm.
nice big surround screens. And um, yeah, I threw LabVIEW away. And for 2 years, I wrote some C Sharp and some Unity, and found it really, really interesting. Like coming from a strong LabVIEW career into this Unity thing. Certainly my mind was blown when I was able to have Unity open, and then with Git, I was able. Well, we didn't use Git; we used a client similar to Git. You could just like change the branch you're working on, and the editor, the environment would just auto update. I think there was this conversation in the Champions forums recently, and the first time someone showed me it, I was like, I had to actually stop and say, just wait, do that again, do what you, and like that kind of stuff. So as an experiment, it was really fun to do. But after a couple of years, I realized I missed LabVIEW. It's like, okay, this is cool, but it's not LabVIEW, and that's what actually made me start looking around back for a LabVIEW job. And now here I am on the other hemisphere of the planet because I decided to change roles again. So I don't know. That's an experiment that I tried. I'm happy I tried it, but I'm glad I'm not a Unity developer, and I'm happy to be a LabVIEW developer.
The biggest thing I like about being a LabVIEW developer is the community. And I don't know if that's I don't know that I've been around enough to experience enough of other communities, but I don't know. I just feel like I fit in there, so it works for me.
I think our community is so special, and I'm really grateful. I think you're an admin on the LabVIEW Discord and things like that, and I think our community is awesome. I think people are so well, not willing. Willing is the wrong word. So happy to see others succeed, I think. Whereas in a lot of other communities, you don't get that. Whereas in LabVIEW, I think there's enough work for everyone. It seems we all just want everyone to get better, and we all sort of learning and getting better at the same time. And I'm really happy with how friendly our community is, and how much respect typically there is. Like you hear about some other languages or other things where people are really rough to each other behind the scenes. Like there's really infighting and all that kind of stuff. Whereas I think we don't have that, or at least not the community side that I'm exposed to. So yeah, I really see that.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from the fact that none of us are CS majors. So all of us are kind of learning as we
Yeah,
go.
yeah, the good point.
Sometimes on like the C++ forums, like, well, somebody asks a question like, didn't you take CS 101? Like, what are you doing? And
Yeah, that's not how you reverse walk a binary tree with a red black nose. Like, I don't know, I'm just an engineer. Like, I don't know, just I fell into this job. I didn't want to become a LabVIEW developer. Like, yeah. So yeah, I think you're right, and I think that makes our community stronger.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end on. But speaking of community, though, you did bring up one thing I want to mention, and that was the LabVIEW Discord, because I had forgotten that you were the one who started that. So we should definitely mention that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's I'm active on there every day, and I think we've got new members joining. Yeah, literally almost every single day. We're up to nearly, I think, over 800 or close to 900 members now, which is pretty good considering it's only been around for a few years. And LabVIEW is pretty niche, right? We're a bunch of weirdos. We know that. So yeah, I think this it's getting a lot of good traction, and I think it's the place to be if you want to get some questions answered or if you just want a casual hangout. So yeah, I think I don't know if you can. I think most people watching this podcast will probably be aware of the LabVIEW Discord, but if you're not, just Google it, and I think you should. It's open to all, so everyone's welcome.
Yeah, it's very active. So that is the thing I like about it, because some of the other forums have kind of like died off and don't get see a lot of new posts. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, are you going to make it over to any of the summits this year in Europe? I mean, next year, are you going to be able to make
do
GDevCon?
you know where the next GDevCon is in Europe? I haven't heard
Yeah,
it.
it's in Brussels, so Belgium. Actually, it's very convenient for me. It's about 2 hours away or an hour and a half away. So that's nice. You can come drink some Belgian beer.
Yeah, I don't know. There is a Latin American one, an Indian one, and a New Zealand, Australia, New Zealand one now. So there's like five of them. So I don't know.
Okay.
Pick my battles and figure out which ones I want to go to.
Yeah, choose one, choose one. It's yeah, I think the European one could be a lot of fun. Like there's a nice solid community. So it'd be good to see some of the
Yeah, I've been
colleagues.
to several of the European ones, so they're pretty good. I like them.
Nice. Well, listen, if I see you there, we can definitely catch up. Hopefully, it's a bit quieter than the bar in Texas, where I think we were trying to have a conversation, and
Shouting.
it was just it really wasn't very good for my voice, given that I had to present the next day.
Yeah,
So it wasn't. Yeah. Anyway, cool. Well, be good to see you.
very good. Thank you. That's it for today's episode of the LabVIEW Experiment. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments or questions, head over to thelabviewexperiment.com and drop me a note. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the LV Experiment.